Here's 5 things to do when changing your strings when you're dropping a gauge. Number 1, we're going to adjust the springs. Number 2, we're going to adjust our neck relief. Number 3, we'll do our action. Number 4, we'll do our nut. Number 5, we'll do the intonation. S-N-A-N-I. Snanny. We'll call it snanny. And if you stick around, we'll also do the soul girl. If any of you got a Gibson style with a stop-tail tunematic bridge, I'll show you how to do this one too. A little bit easier actually. What are we going to need? In no particular order, strings, wire cutters, screwdriver, capo, some business cards, if you've got one, a radius gauge, string winder, an Allen key or screwdriver that fits your bridge. I'm going to try these gold and silver jewelry wipes on my frets just to polish them and clean them. You're going to want a cloth and some rags, some soapy water. For my cleaning solution, I like to use water with a couple of drops of detergent in it. The detergent is just dishwashing liquid. Good thing is it'll cut through all the grease and grime off your hands, but it won't hurt your finish. You need a tuner and a cable. If you're like me and your OCD is going out of control, hopefully that helps just enough. You might have seen this done with post-it notes. What we're going to do is we're going to put business cards. So you just get, I'm using business cards because I don't have any sticky notes. Either way works. I like business cards because they're a bit thicker, but what you want to do is get them so they're quite firm under there. So I'll put another one on. And you want to have to sort of push them in so that it just sits it up a little tiny bit, because when this goes, it's going to push down some pressure on there anyway. But that gets us in about the ballpark. And what this will do is when I cut these strings off, it'll keep that where I want it. What we've got to do is we've got to let some tension off these springs as well, because when we go down a gauge, those springs are pulling these strings back with more tension. Lighter gauge, you'll have less tension, so this here will tend to pull back too far, so we need to let off some of that relief. Why am I dropping a gauge of strings? Well, 10 to 52s has always been my go-to, but I'm starting to get cracking fingers in this exmery type of stuff on my fingers in it. It's actually starting to get a bit painful. I strung up this with 9 to 46. It's actually a lot easier for me to play. Doesn't affect the tone too much, and actually I'm enjoying the way it feels. When I was playing in bands and touring, I always used 10 to 52s, and when we dropped dead, I always threw a 56 on here. I don't know, it was a heavy band. We were playing lots of riffs, not much lead. So these days, I just want to play for enjoyment, and I'm finding the lighter strings a little easier to play for me. So that's why I'm doing it. That's my reason. You might have your own reasons. Now we've got this blocked up. Let's do some chopping. Now, instead of just chopping your strings with all full tension off and they go and pinging everywhere, I like to let off tension on my strings before I cut them. 2 reasons I like to do that. 1, I don't like getting stuck in the eye with a guitar string. And 2, I kind of feel like it eases tension on that neck a little less suddenly, so it's not as much of a shock to it. Don't know if there's any real need for it, but I kind of feel like the less stress on the neck, the better. You can see this guitar's been played a bit as well, so I want to give the fingerboard a nice clean and everything while we're at it. Now, your guitar should be relatively easy to de-string. As long as you haven't had a psychopath put a luthier knot on your strings, it should come off pretty easier. When you restring your guitar, I will show you how to string these so that you don't get slippage. There's no need for crazy luthier knots. We've got the pull through the top hooks here. I love these bridges, they're so easy to change strings on. Alright, now usually if we were putting the same gauge strings back on, we could just drop them in to this one because it's not a through the back. But because we need to adjust those springs, we're going to take this back plate off anyways. Well guys, if you're enjoying the content and you want to see more, help me out. All you got to do is like the video, subscribe, hit the bell, and leave me a comment. Pretty simple, and it's free to do. So what we will end up doing is loosening these off. Another good reason for using a long shafted screwdriver is it's good easy access to these screws. If you get your drill and put your drill in there and then start ripping away, you're going to have too much angle, you end up stripping these screws or you'll do damage to the wood. So leave your drill out of this one. Screwdriver. Alright, once you get to this point, don't get too excited. Let's slow down a little bit and give this thing a little bit of a clean up. Soap solution. Don't drench your guitar, your electronics in here. On your rag, best place to put it. Like I said, this is just dishwashing liquid and some water, and it will take all that crap off your fingerboard. Now, if you've got an unfinished rosewood board or something like that, like this, don't use soapy water. You don't want to put any more water into that fretboard. Use an oil conditioner to clean that with. Or if it's super manky and worn out and you're doing a full-on resto to it, then the old razor blade scraping is probably the best way to get it sorted. If you've got a maple neck that's worn all the way through to the wood, it might be worthwhile just being a little bit cautious with the water. I've used these before, but I'm going to give them a go. And I want to polish these frets without abrasing them, so I don't want to take anything off them. So I was just going to see. Ooh, look at that. Yep, nice and slippery. So that's what we want, nice slippery fret, whereas this one's starting to get a little bit ganked up. I like to do this type of clean every time I change my strings. Just keeps it playing the best it possibly can. So this is not going to take anything off the fret, it's just polishing them. Remember when I built this guitar, I gave it a fret dress, recrowned, fret ends, the whole works. So these frets are in great shape. They're just a bit dirty from playing. If you don't have any of these things, you could just use a rag with some polishing compound or something like that on it. A little bit of fretwear starting to come into this. Sign of good guitar fretwear, I reckon. Means it gets played a lot. Some fingernail gouges too. I need to cut my nails more often. That's okay, I don't mind. There we go, $1 million. And look at that. Now when you go up a gauge, so if you're going from 9s to 10s or 10s to 13s or whatever you're doing, if you're going up, you're going to have to take care of your nut here. You're going to have to redo those nut slots. In this case, we're going down. And we're not going down too far. If you were going sort of from maybe something like a 13 all the way down to an 8, you may have to replace your nut if you don't want too much play in there. But going from 10s to 9s, in my case, light top, heavy bottom, 10 to 52 to 9 to 46. This 46 will sit just nicely in there, which is probably perfect. Before I do that, I'm going to give it a little bit of a wax. This is just automotive wax. If you're enjoying the content and you want to see more, all you got to do is like the video, subscribe, hit the bell, and leave me a comment. It's free to do. Alright, everyone's got their own tips on these, on how to measure your strings. Some people go 3 down, cut, and then put it in. What I like to do is pull it through, seat it in the nut, grab it from either the first fret or from the nut. I generally go from the first fret, and all I do is pull it back 1 fret. That's it. Then what I do is I will loop that first wind so over the top of the string here, and then all my winds will now go underneath. So if you have a look there, you've got one over and the rest under. Including that over, you get a couple of turns on there. That's about all you want. That is enough to lock your string in. There is no need for some crazy luthier knot. Some guys who wind electric guitars don't even do the over and under on the wound strings, they only do it on your steel strings. No need for a crazy knot. Again, line it up, pull it through, first fret, 1 fret back, loop that first one over the top, and wind it on. Sorry about the background noise, guys. It started to rain again. Pretty heavy too by the sound of it. Perfect. Next thing we want to do is bring it to tune. So grab your tuner, not tuna. It's not a smelly fish. Let's get it up the pitch. It's okay if that's not perfectly on the button, but what we want is the tension. You can see here, these are jammed hard under. So what we need to do now is release some of this tension back here. Just go a few turns at a time until these are not being jammed down by those springs. And there it is. And that is bang on where I want it. Nice easy trick. So that's the springs, which is step one of what you need to do. Now, step two is neck relief. This is buzzing like a horny honeybee. How do we fix fret buzz? When we've restrung the guitar with lighter gauge string, your neck relief is going to be all up the wazoo. So what we want to do, take your capo, put it on the first fret. The reason we're using a capo on here is it just makes life a little bit easier. What I like to do is I like to finger where the neck meets the body. On an acoustic, you generally do it from the 12th. You can see here we've got absolutely no neck relief at all. With the heavier strings, the tension was pulling the neck like this. So you tighten up your truss rod, so then when the tension pulls, you've got a small amount of relief. Or if you like it flat, it can be flat, however you prefer it. I like just the tiniest bit of relief in mine. So what's happened now is we've got less tension pulling on the neck, so the neck has probably gone into a slight back bow. So what we need to do is loosen our truss rod a little to get back a little bit of relief. That will probably solve all of the fret buzz. Because I am loosening the truss rod, it's okay to leave tension on the neck. If I was tightening the truss rod, I would loosen the tension on the strings. So I'm going to do very, very small amount of adjustment. Here, I'm probably only going to go to about here. Anti-clockwise, that's probably enough. If you've got a notched edge, you can use that as well. That's right about where I want it. Plug your stinky fish back in. Just check your tune. You will be a little bit flat. And that is all it needed. So there's your neck relief done. So we've done springs, we've done neck relief. Next is action. Check your action. Now this was all set up pretty nicely, and I'm pretty happy with my action is. So I'm not actually going to do anything to my action. Not always, but what can sometimes happen when you do neck relief in this type of setup is your action might come up a little bit higher than you like. So you might want to just adjust and bring down. Use your radius gauge, which matches your guitar, and just check the radius on your bridge here. And if you make an adjustment, make sure they all match up to that radius at the heel. If you've got a compound radius, then this is going to need to be a bit more. When you adjust your action, don't put your saddles on a lean. So if you've got a radius here, you don't want one screw down higher and one screw up higher, one lower on the same saddle. These screws need to maintain the same distance so that your saddle is flat. It steps up and down on each saddle. But what you don't want here is you don't want that type of thing. See how it's on a lean? You want it to be perfectly even. So that's flat, steps up. And then just go and adjust your action as you need it. Now, if your nut needs any adjustment, this is where it is. My nut has started to crack here, so I might need to replace this nut. But for now, it'll do. These strings have sat into there perfectly, so I don't need to adjust anything here. Like I said earlier, if you're going down a string gauge, so if you're going from 10s or 12s down to 9s, then you shouldn't need to do too much with your nut here. If you're going from 8s or 9s all the way up to a 13s, you're going to have to open up those nut slots. And likewise, if you're going from a 13 all the way down to an 8, which is a huge jump, you might need to replace your nut because those slots might be just too open. Changing your strings, your springs, your neck relief, all of this sort of stuff going down a set of gauge, your intonation's going to be a little bit out. It won't be out by much. And what I like to do with my intonation is I will intonate it laying down like this, but then I will stand it up into playing position and intonate it again. A little bit sharp. Let's see where we are with the others. So the E's a little bit sharp, A's pretty close, a little tiny bit sharp. D, pretty much bang on. G, little tiny bit sharp. So everything's looking a little bit sharp. What I will do before I do any adjustment, sharp, I will stand it up to playing position and just try it again. Very sharp. Little sharp. Pretty close. Now your intonation is how far between your nut and your saddle that distance is. So if you're sharp, you're going to need to increase the distance, which means tightening the screw. If you're flat, You need to decrease the distance, which means loosening the screw. Flat means that you have to shorten the distance. Sharp means you have to lengthen the distance. Tiny little bit at a time, guys. Don't overdo the amount that you do here. So I'm sharp, so I need to tighten it up. Give us a little bit more length. You do a tiny bit at a time. And see, that's tuned it up a whole step from E to F, so I might have gone too far. Oh, we are so close. Now, another thing I like to do when I do my intonation is not only check the 12th fret. If you're checking the 12th fret, cool. But you want to check G. See, that's a little flat. A. A's bang on. Just check around your fretboard. Because what can happen is you can be slightly out here and there. You want to make it work across the whole board. Bang on. Happy with that. Now I know the rest of these are going to be a little bit sharp, so I'm going to make the adjustments now. So every time you make an adjustment, you're going to have to tune it back up. That's intonation. Now, once you're intonated, what you want to do is go through, stretch the shit out of your strings, otherwise you'll never stay in tune. So the way I like to stretch my strings, 3 fingers under and your thumb, and just push and pull like that. And I do it with both hands, go up and down. This is a nice quick way of stretching your strings. And once I've done that, you retune it again, and then just go and play it for a bit. Just break it in, tune it in. Put it back together and we are done. Alright, next on the block is me old Firebird. Oh, I love this guitar. She's a player's grade, so it does have some nicks and bruises on it, but that's because I've played the crap out of it. We have to be careful cleaning this because it's got a fragile nitrocellulose paint job on it, but at this stage I'm just going to give her a clean, polish those frets. Now, just a light polish. These frets are original. We've got the original nibs on them and they are in great nick. With this guy, we don't have to worry about the springs because there is none. What we'll do, strings off, clean, strings on, neck relief, action, intonation. Not going to have to do anything with the nut on this one. But again, if you're going up a size, you may have to give some more room. If you're going down a big size, you'll need to probably replace. But this is the original nut on here. Still got the lacquered sides. I want to keep this guitar as original as I can. Being a shorter scale, yes, there's not as much tension on these strings, especially drop tune like this one. But like I said, I'm preferring lighter gauge strings these days. My fingers are knackered, so to keep playing, I have to do a few things. If you get one of these stuck in here, and you can't get it out, a nice little trick I like to do is take a slightly thin string, pop it through. There you go. Sometimes they get stuck in there. Give these a once over. Wake up! You must have dozed off because you missed me clean the fretboard, polish the frets, wash and clean the guitar, give it a little polish. You missed all that, you must have been asleep. Tunematic bridges are a little bit different by quite a lot. One of the most annoying things when you're doing strings on a tunematic is when you clean the guitar. See that? These move around. So you're always going to have to redo your action. If you're not comfortable with that, you need to find a way, maybe tape that down or something. I find it to be a pain in the ass. Here's what it is. Which way around do these go? Screw at the back, screw at the front. Well, I've always put the screw at the front. Why, you ask? When your string goes on here and it goes down over here, you don't want these around this way. So what happens is the string hits the screw, and then you have to crank this way up. So if you put this over this way, you can still have this cranked all the way down with a good break angle and no string attachment. Depending on your break angle though, if it's a little bit much, you might have to pull this up a little bit. No biggie. Make sure this goes on the right way. Don't go putting this on this way and then trying to wrap it over. It's just weirdness. They go on like so. Strings through the back. Another thing you might want to do when you're changing your strings is just check your tuning machines. If they're a little bit loose, give them a little bit of a tighten up. Nothing wrong with just giving them a little bit of a tweak. You can also grease them too with a little bit of lube. One of the things I found is if you keep your guitar maintained regularly, there's never a point where you've got to do a massive amount of work on it. When you change your strings, all you gotta do is a little bit of a clean, a little bit of a tweak here and there, and there you go. So what I like to do when I string up one of these is get all the strings into the tail piece. You can do this however you want. This is just how I like to do it. That was noisy. Same technique here works. Grab one, pull back one, loop over once, and wind it on. On a shorter scale, you might want to give yourself a little bit more. So on the 25-inch scale, one was enough. On this one, you might want to go just one and a little bit. Firebird, of course, you've got to wrap the other way. With the Tune-o-matic, just watch this end. You don't get string pinch in the middle to make sure it sits on the saddle. These are cool, but they're a pain in the ass. Somewhat easier because we're not floating any bridge or any springs or anything like that. So all we've got to do now is have a look at our neck relief. Now when you've got a neck that's way back like this or something on an SG, you don't want to go all the way back to the neck joint. Just do it from about the 14th, 1st to 14th, and you can measure what sort of relief you got. I like to have this tiniest little tap of relief. I don't use any gauges for this, I just do it by feel, but just the tiniest little tap. If there's nothing there, it's too straight for me. What I find, if your neck's too straight, I find you'll get a lot of fret buzz. Giving it just the tiniest little bit of relief means you can have your action a bit lower and miss those huge amounts of fret buzz, like that sort of stuff there. Of course you can get fret buzz doing that, but you want it to be in a pretty good spot. D-string, clean, restring, neck relief done. The action on this, I actually fluked it, just putting it on where it was. It's perfectly where I want it. I like a pretty low action. Sometimes I will be okay with a little bit of fret buzz as long as that action's where I want it, but with thinner strings I find you can have a slightly higher action to alleviate that fret buzz, because these are going to flap around a bit more too with the lower tension. Then the next thing we want to do is check the nut. This nut's fine, it's original, I'm leaving it as is, but like I said, if you're going up in string gauge, you're going to need to open them up with a nut file. If you're going down a lot, you may need to replace your nut. From 10 to 52 down to 9 to 46 isn't a huge jump. You'll notice it in tension and playability, but it's not a huge jump in actual diameter and that sort of thing. The next thing we're going to do is check our intonation. Very flat. Good. And when you play these out as well, let the string ring out a little bit. Let it settle. You'll notice the needle will move a little bit. And see, it will come into where it wants to be. With flat, if you remember, we need to go this way to shorten. If it's sharp, we need to go this way to lengthen. And in this case, I'm going to have to tighten to bring it sharp. Now what I'll do is I'll go through, check it in playing position. You do have to adjust a bit to stretching because it's much easier to stretch now, so you do have the tendency to overstretch. And all that's left to do now is stretch the strings in and watch this video here if you want to see more guitar mods.